Well, good morning, Jan. You were the first one to respond to my little teaser a couple of minutes ago. And so that is a signal that it is 9 o'clock. It's a little alarm that I have on my my other cell phone, the one that I took the picture with that I just posted a couple of minutes ago. This is my real cell phone. The one that you saw above the computer is the cell phone that I got about 3 or 4 years ago from the Archdiocese. It was part of a program to give every priest in the Archdiocese a cell phone that and a number and a connectivity and all of that sort of thing. In order to, I'm going to reset this just a little bit to just be able to have a good picture. Okay, now the cell phone that I'm using to take the YouTube video is a very good one. It's also an iPhone that was part of an archdiocesan program from some years back. To be honest, I'm just going to have to redo this a little bit here and see. Yeah, I think that's a little bit better placement for the YouTube video. Those who are watching live probably didn't see any difference except a little bit of shakiness. Anyway, here I am after all that fuss. As you can see, I'm surrounded by gadgets. I've have the reputation of being a little bit of a gadget freak, but you know what? It's kind of paying off, I think. Because it does enable me to enter into this kind of communication with you. And I know that a lot of people are doing that with one another in this day and age. I got the inspiration for that picture that I posted just a couple of minutes before I went live, just to show my setup, from Sister Nancy Usselman, who is, doing some similar sorts of things, and she posted a picture, basically a picture of herself with her cell phone, showing her computer set up. She had it piled on a couple of books, and so I thought, well, why don't I try something like that? And now you also got a view of the fact that I did fill my coffee cup. This particular cup gets highly filled, almost to overflowing, by the maximum setting on there, but that's fine. I had a few sips and I'm going to have a few more. Okay, now it's Holy Thursday. This evening, it is still Lent. This evening, kind of formally, the Lenten season ends with the start of the Triduum. So this evening, with the Mass of the Lord's Supper, the Triduum begins. Now, that doesn't mean that, oh boy, you can give up fasting or whatever other practice that you had or whatever. No, tomorrow is a particular day of fast. Saturday is not formally, Holy Saturday is not formally a day of fast, but I think it needs to be observed individually as with maybe a higher level of fasting even than Good Friday. And I'll talk about that a little bit more probably on Saturday. Anyway, to begin, I'm going to use the Gospel for the Mass of the Lord's Supper that we celebrate, that is celebrated this evening, that most of us will be participating, myself included, by watching it on TV. I plan to watch with small groups of others around here on the public TVs in the little nooks and crannies that we have around here at Nazareth House. Plan to be watching that on EWTN. I believe it begins at 2:30 with a choral concert, and it's broadcast from the National Shrine in Washington, D.C. So hello to everybody who has come on: Jan, Irene, Marcia, Karen Lynn, Kathleen, Helene. Welcome, Helene. Good to see you. And Denise. And are there any more? No, not really yet. At least not who have identified themselves as saying good morning. I try not to get too distracted by the comments that come up. Occasionally I will glance over there and see your comments, but as you know, because I respond to every one of them afterwards, I do review them, and I appreciate very much all of the comments that you make. And I just realized that I was sidetracked into another track, but I guess that's okay. You put up with me. Good morning, John. Welcome. And so let's go back and see if we can recollect ourselves a bit in prayer. I'd like to begin with the gospel for the Mass of the Lord's Supper. Before the feast of Passover, Jesus knew that his hour had come to pass from this world to the Father. He loved his own in the world, and he loved them to the end. The devil had already induced Judas, son of Simon the Iscariot, to hand him over. So, during the supper, fully aware that the Father had put everything into his power, and that he had come from God and was returning to God, he rose from supper and took off his outer garments. He took a towel and tied it around his waist. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet, and to dry them with a towel around his waist. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Master, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus answered and said to him, "What I am doing you do not understand now, but you will understand later." Peter said to him, "You will never wash my feet." And Jesus answered him, "Unless I wash you, you will have no inheritance with me." Simon Peter said to him, "Master, then not only my feet, but my hands and my head as well." Jesus said to him, "Whoever has bathed has no need except to have his feet washed, for he is clean all over. So you are clean, but not all." For he knew who would betray him, and for this reason he said, "Not all of you are clean." So when he had washed their feet, he put his garments back on and reclined at table again. He said to them, "Do you realize what I have done for you? You call me teacher and master, and rightly so, for indeed I am. If I, therefore, the master and the teacher, have washed your feet, you ought to wash one another's feet. I have given you a model to follow, so that, as I have done for you, you should also do." The Gospel of the Lord. Lord Jesus, as we make our way as we journey with you through these holy days, these days of your ultimate sacrifice, of your ultimate example to us. Help us to understand. Help us to see with new eyes the things that we may have become so accustomed to in our faith and in our spirituality and in our religious practice that they become habit, and we don't really reflect on them. We don't probe more deeply for their meaning. Help us to understand more and more deeply the meaning of what you have done for us, not only for our benefit, but also for our example, to show us how to follow you. And so, Lord, fill us with your Spirit. Open us to your example. Open us to your life within us. Help us to embrace our current situations, whatever they may be for each one of us, whatever it is for your people, the church, whatever it is for our world. Help us, Lord, to embrace fully the situation that we find ourselves in, that we are actually a part of. And help us to discover you going before us, carrying your cross, and inviting us to be attentive to the needs of one another, so that we may help one another bear our cross. Help us not to become self-centered in our pains and in our deprivations, even if it's deprivation from celebrating the Eucharist that is your gift, that we celebrate today by fasting from it, by being deprived of it. Help us to see that the heart of the Last Supper, the fulfillment of the body and blood that you gave us in the Last Supper, the fulfillment of that is to do what we have opportunity to do every day, to wash one another's feet. Help us to probe this mystery. Help us to discover you, where you are found, not where we would like you to be, not where we have grown accustomed and comfortable to seeing you. Help us to see you where it's uncomfortable, in the challenges. In the challenges even that we present to one another by our own imperfections, by our own sometimes lack of willingness to follow you as wholeheartedly as we want to, as you invite us. Help us simply to put your help us simply to put aside our expectations, even our desires, and to open our eyes to your presence in one another. And so, Jesus, you are our teacher and our master. Help us to follow you as our model, so that we may become one with you in your sacrifice. And so we ask this in union with you, presenting our prayer ultimately to God the Father in the power of the Spirit. Amen. That wasn't the prayer that I was intending to pray when I started. I wasn't really sure where the prayer would take me, but I wanted the prayer to be a very brief one, and the prayer lasted about 15 minutes, almost 15 minutes. I'd like not to go too much over time, but I'd like to just maybe tell you a couple of things about today here at Nazareth House and the next couple of days. And then I'd like to go back to the gospel with... No, I'm going to start with going back to the gospel, and then I'll talk a little bit about what's happening here at Nazareth House and how our life has been together here, and then I'll sign off. One of the things that struck me as I was preparing for this and as I was reading it today is the way that John introduces this event at the Last Supper. Clearly, the Passover was the eve of the Passover. Jesus knew his hour had come to pass from this world to the Father. He loved his own in the world, and he loved them to the end. We're very familiar with that, although its full meaning, sometimes we fail really to understand its full meaning, or to let ourselves understand it. Talks about Judas. We sometimes, concentrate on Judas, and let's let Judas be Judas. Let's not concentrate on him. We always seem to want to make some kind of comment about him. Let's forget about Judas. But during the supper, John continues, fully aware that the Father had put everything into his power. And we may be inclined to ask then, if Jesus had the power to save us in some other way by doing something else that did not involve that kind of self-emptying suffering of the cross, the pain and the agony of the cross. If Jesus had the power to do that, why didn't he do it? After all, he was God, the Son of God. And John's Gospel introduces the whole scene of the Passion with the affirmation that he realized, he was fully aware as a human being, as a man. Jesus was fully aware that God had put everything in his power. Now, if we probe that a little more deeply, what is the ultimate power? Exercise of power. We can imagine, if we were God, how we would use that power. But our use of that power would probably be modeled on a military model, or a political model, or control model. Did we ever think that it takes more power to give up control than it does to exercise control? Parents know this, don't you? Not having been a parent, at least not in a physical sense, I have to speak as one from other people's experience, but I think parents know this to a certain extent. It takes more willpower at some point to release control of your children than it does to hang on to control. Everybody knows how much damage is done by a mother or a father who refuses to give up their own need to control their children, going on into past adolescence, into adulthood. They still have to control. They still have to control. And sometimes it's that need to pretend they have power over their children that is a sign of their weakness, not of their power. Because it takes power, it takes effort, it takes energy, it takes all that you've got to go from the control that's needed for nurturing, helping children to grow, forming them in certain ways, and then to give up that control at the appropriate time and allow the seed that perhaps you planted but you did not grow to flourish in that child. So I'm just reflecting on the fact that it takes more power to give up control. It takes more power to not exercise power than it does to exercise that power as maybe a shortcut. So, how was Jesus acting with the power of God to overcome the greatest enemy that we as human beings have, and that is death? Some may say the greatest enemy is Satan. Well, they are allied with one another. Satan, you might say, his ultimate tool is death. In fact, how much evil is done out of the fear of death, out of trying to avoid death, out of not facing it. Jesus had to draw on the power of God, which he possessed in its fullness, in order to face our greatest enemy. And Scripture in a number of places says our greatest enemy is death. That's something St. Paul reflected on a couple of times. I don't remember the exact places. But our greatest enemy is death. That is what Jesus faced. And that is what Jesus faced with the power of God. So let's go back here to Jesus at the table with the clueless apostles. They were anticipating, I think, a great outcome from this Passover celebration. Remember, they were celebrating the liberation of the people of Israel from the slavery of Egypt. That was the model for what was going to happen. They were anticipating that the Messiah would somehow miraculously exercise the power of God by violently overcoming the Romans. They had the only model that they had, and this is kind of a key word, the only model that they had was a military model. How do you secure liberty? How do you secure freedom? How do you secure independence? It's by going to war. It's by a battle. It's a military thing. Fight against your enemies and beat them. That's what they were expecting. That's what they were expecting to happen. They hadn't a clue. They hadn't a clue about what Jesus was really all about, even though he had been with them for 3 years, for so long. They hadn't a clue. And he says that a couple of times during his Last Supper discourse. They had ample opportunity to know. He kept telling them what he was really all about, in both instruction and in parable and in command. Just read the Gospels, they're full of that, where he is trying to tell them in their cluelessness what kind of a Messiah he was going to be. But they came at this point without a clue. Now, one of the things that they may have been expecting at this Last Supper, that John captures in a way that the Matthew, Mark, and Luke, the Synoptic Gospels, don't. One of the things they may have been expecting was that Jesus would lay out his battle plans, that he would tell them his strategy, that he would give them their assignments for this ultimate battle to liberate, to free the people from the Romans. And you know the thing is, he did. He did. That's why, at the point where, in a strategy session with his key generals, that's why he rose up from the table and basically said, "This is your strategy." He took off his outer garments. He took a towel and tied it around his waist. He poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet and dry them with a towel. This is your battle strategy. This is what you are to do to overcome death. Wow. They still didn't really get it. Simon Peter, whom he had kind of made the 4-star general of his forces, his messianic army, and he was aware of that. I'm the rock. You're not going to wash my feet. And Jesus says, you don't understand what I'm doing. You don't understand it now. You will later, but you don't understand it now. But you have to let me do this to you, for you, or you won't have any part of me. Well, then he goes overboard, not my feet, but my hands and head as well. Well, this is a little mysterious. I'm not going to go into this. I'm not sure how to go into it too much further, but this business about whoever has bathed has no need to wash except to have his feet washed. He's clean all over. But foot washing was the lowliest occupation of the lowliest slave in a household. And let's get used to the fact that slaves were very common as part of the life and the understanding of how things worked in those days. I'm not going to go into that, but this whole question of the relationship of slavery and the gospel is a very, very interesting one. But to become the lowliest. In fact, I think one of the significances of thinking about slavery in all of its negativity, but to think about it in a positive way, is that Jesus commands us willfully to do what people were forced to do unwillingly. Wow. Isn't that a thought? People Jesus commands us and models for us to do willingly what people in that society were forced to do unwillingly. Think about that for a long time. So anyway, Jesus introduces his discourse about the strategy, the battle strategy of the kingdom of God with this gesture. And then he says, I have given you a model to follow, so that as I have done for you, you also should do. To me, that puts a whole new light on that farewell discourse of John's Gospel at the Last Supper. I think it embraces the better part of 3 chapters. All of these things that focus on the power of the Spirit coming, and focuses on the new commandment, which is not love God above all and love your neighbor as yourself. That's the old commandment. He's not doing away with that, but he's bringing it to a whole new level. The new commandment is love one another as I have loved you, as I am loving you. And that means what's going to happen the next day. That means embracing the cross. But he begins with a strategy. How do we embrace the cross? We talk about bearing our cross. I don't think bearing the cross in union with Jesus is a good metaphor, because Jesus didn't just bear it, he embraced it. And he embraced it with the power of God. He had the power to do what was humanly impossible, to embrace the kind of suffering that every ounce of our humanity commands us, pushes us to run away from, to avoid at all costs. At all costs. He embraced it. But the secret to embracing the cross in union with Jesus, he gives us right at the beginning of this Last Supper. As I have done for you, you do for one another. You want to know where God's will is for you? Look around you and respond to the needs with the mentality, the needs of others, with the mentality of, this is how I can wash their feet. Extend yourself, perhaps, to go that extra mile, as Jesus often tells us, doesn't he? Go that extra mile. Go that extra mile in however the situation, however the needs of others present themselves to you today. Go that extra mile, because you, in serving them, you are embracing the cross with Jesus. So it might be good, and I think I'm going to do that as part of my exercises today, is to read those next few chapters in John's Gospel, that farewell discourse, and to see that as Jesus giving battle instructions to his generals as to how the power of God is to be exercised in order to win the battle against the greatest enemy of humankind, which is death. And we also realize that death transcends our human mortality, that there are other forms of death. The forms of death that lock us into ourselves. Self-centeredness, greed, pride, all of those things are forms of death. We look around us, isn't the world being dominated, captivated by a culture of death? And we tend to think of culture of death almost exclusively in terms of things like abortion and euthanasia and a few other of those what we call life issues. There are many other life issues too. And the culture of death actually has its heart and its roots in what we've termed as the 7 deadly sins. Focusing on pride, focusing on greed, focusing on self-centeredness, and all of those things that are death-dealing rather than life-giving. Okay, I have rambled a lot about that. I hope that, well, I'm going to put it this way. Quite frankly, I received a lot of what I would like to see as grace, perhaps, in this rambling. I've developed a few new insights that I'm going to carry on into the rest of my day. So I hope maybe you have too. Thank you for letting me think out loud for about a half hour now. I'm going to finish now with just letting you know what our day here is going to look like. We are not celebrating the Mass of the Lord's Supper. We're not washing feet. We're not doing any of that. However, this afternoon, Sister Celestina and Father John Woolway are going to do a procession of the Blessed Sacrament through carrying the monstrance, the Blessed Sacrament in the monstrance, going to do a procession around all of the hallways. And I've prepared a little worship aid here for the people, who they all have it, with a little instruction about what to do, how to venerate from their rooms when the procession with the Blessed Sacrament is going by, how to worship and adore the Lord in His sacrament. That at least is something that we can do that continues to follow the guidelines, and perhaps focusing on just one aspect here enables us to gain a focus that we would not otherwise have, because so many of our celebrations are just filled with all kinds of stuff pouring forth. Our celebrations of these days are so overwhelming that maybe we let the majority of what's really happening in our celebrations of the Triduum, beginning with Holy Thursday evening, just sort of pass over us because there is so much. Well, now we've got the opportunity to focus on just a few things. And notice on this cover what I put was a painting of the Last Supper and the institution of the Eucharist, and of course the washing of the feet. They are inseparable. Now we have to focus on how do we wash one another's feet. So following that, this was timed to be the kind of the prelude to the broadcast of the live broadcast of the Mass of the Lord's Supper from the National Shrine that's being broadcast over EWTN, and that's beginning at 2:30 this afternoon in the on whatever cable channel you have for EWTN. So now I'm actually going to finish. It's been 40 minutes, can you believe? I'm sorry, but not really. But I'm going to finish with the prayer that I think joins us in spirit with Jesus in His agony in the garden. That is kind of at the end of today. And it's from Saint Ignatius. And it's one that's familiar to many of us. Take, Lord, and receive all my liberty, my memory, my understanding, my entire will, all that I have and call my own. You have given all to me. To you, Lord, I return it. Everything is yours. Do with it what you will. Give me only your love and your grace. That is enough for me. If you really enter into that prayer, you will realize that praying that prayer with absolute sincerity and meaning takes more power than to move mountains. With that, God bless you all and have an absolutely marvelous, marvelous day. Good Friday tomorrow, Holy Saturday the next day, Easter Sunday. And if you have any particular points or questions that you might like me to address on these days, put it in the comments, and I will read it and either give you a thumbs up or a heart, one or the other. So God bless you all, and have a great day.